vanish during their daily routine. The walk from your front door to your car, a familiar path you could trace with your eyes closed. A quick trip to the grocery store, navigating aisles you know by heart. A morning jog through your own neighborhood. The rhythm of your feet on the pavement a steady, comforting beat. These are the moments that stitch our lives together, the predictable, mundane rituals of a normal day. We perform them on autopilot, without a second thought, wrapped in a profound and often unexamined sense of security that comes with the familiar. It's a feeling we take for granted, the quiet assumption that the world just outside our door is safe. But what happens when that rhythm is irrevocably broken? When the path you walk every single day, the one you trust implicitly, leads you to nowhere? What happens when the ordinary becomes the site of the unthinkable? For hundreds of women every year, the most mundane parts of their routine become the last place they are ever seen. The safety of the everyday is revealed to be a fragile illusion, and sometimes, the most terrifying danger is hiding in plain sight, waiting for the one moment we let our guard down. It's a pattern as deeply disturbing as it is chillingly predictable. A woman disappears while doing something completely, utterly ordinary. She's on her way to work, a commute she's made 1,000 times. She's out for a run on a trail she loves. She's heading home from a friend's house, a short walk away. These aren't stories about venturing into dangerous, unknown territory or taking reckless chances. They are about women who were stolen from the very fabric of their own lives, often from places they considered their sanctuary, their community, their home. When we look closer at these cases, when we peel back the layers of initial shock and confusion, hidden patterns begin to emerge, critical details that are often overlooked in the crucial first hours of an investigation. We see how an alarming number of disappearances happen in these routine settings, creating a terrifying paradox where familiarity breeds a false, and sometimes fatal, sense of security. And tragically, a staggering number of these cases are ultimately linked to men the victims knew intimately, current or former partners whose behavior might have been a screaming red flag long before the woman went missing. It's a pattern of domestic control escalating to the ultimate act of erasure. Then there's the response from law enforcement and the media, a response that can dramatically, and often unfairly, alter the entire course of an investigation. A phenomenon known as missing white woman syndrome reveals a disturbing and undeniable disparity. Cases involving young, attractive, white women receive exponentially more media attention. That intense spotlight translates into more resources, more political pressure, and more public engagement than cases involving women of color or those from different socioeconomic backgrounds. This inherent bias can be the difference between a case that is solved and one that goes cold. It is a heartbreaking reflection of which victims our society, consciously or not, decides are worthy of our collective attention and grief. The stories that follow are not just about the moment a person went missing. They are about the powerful illusion of safety, the insidious patterns of violence hiding just beneath the surface of normal life, and the devastating, unending reality for families left waiting for an answer that may never come. They reveal how the most ordinary day can, in a single, unexplainable, and violent moment, become a permanent nightmare. The empty parking spot, the disappearance of Jennifer Kesse. For Jennifer Kesse, January 24, 2006, was supposed to be just another Tuesday. At 24 years old, she was the very definition of a success story, a young woman who was building a life she loved, piece by deliberate piece. After graduating from the University of Central Florida with a degree in finance, she didn't just find a job. She excelled, quickly climbing the ladder at her timeshare company. She had recently landed a coveted promotion to finance manager, a role that recognized her intelligence and relentless drive. She was smart, fiercely ambitious, and deeply loved by her tight-knit family and her boyfriend of a year, Rob Allen. Just a few months earlier, Jennifer had achieved a major life goal. She bought her own condominium at the Mosaic at Millennia Complex in Orlando, Florida. It was a huge step, a tangible symbol of her hard-won independence. The complex itself was brand new, so new that it was still a sprawling construction site. While it was a gated community, and she told her family she felt safe, that feeling wasn't absolute. She confessed to her parents that the constant presence of so many construction workers sometimes made her uneasy. She spoke of lingering stares and unsolicited comments that left her feeling unsettled. It made her uncomfortable enough that she developed a strict safety routine. She would call a friend or family member every single time she walked the short distance between her condo and her car, a small shield against a vague but persistent anxiety. The weekend before she disappeared was a picture of happiness. Jennifer and Rob had just returned from a romantic getaway to St. Croix. She arrived back in Florida on Sunday, stayed at Rob's place that night, and then drove straight to her office in Ocoee on Monday morning, ready to take on the week. That Monday was filled with the normal, happy calls that connect a close family. She chatted with her parents, Drew and Joyce, her brother Logan, and later with Rob, excitedly recounting the details of her vacation. By all accounts, she was on top of the world, energized and happy. Her last known communication was a phone call with Rob around 10 p.m. that Monday night. They said goodnight, expecting to talk again in the morning, just like always. The next morning, her carefully constructed routine was shattered. Rob called her around 8 a.m. on his way to work, a daily ritual for them. The call went straight to voicemail. He tried again a short time later, but got the same result. He reasoned she was likely busy in a big meeting she had mentioned. But then, around 11 a.m., Jennifer's boss called him, and a cold knot of dread began to tighten in his stomach. Jennifer, the famously reliable, always-on-time employee, had never made it to work. She hadn't called in sick. She was just gone. Her boss immediately called her parents, Drew and Joyce, who, without a moment's hesitation, began the frantic 2-hour drive from their home to Orlando. As sheer panic set in, they called the manager of Jennifer's condo complex and asked him to use a spare key to check on her, praying for a simple explanation. What he found only deepened the rapidly spiraling mystery. Inside her condo, everything looked unnervingly normal. A damp towel was draped by the shower. Her pajamas were on the floor where she'd left them. Makeup was spread out on the bathroom counter, as if she had been interrupted mid-application. An outfit was laid out neatly on her bed. It was a scene frozen in time, the portrait of a woman in the middle of getting ready for her day. There were no signs of a struggle, no forced entry, nothing to suggest violence. But her purse, her keys, her cell phone, and her iPod were all gone. The only other thing missing was Jennifer herself and her black 2004 Chevy Malibu. The initial police response was frustratingly, agonizingly slow. When Jennifer's family first reported her missing, they felt they were being dismissed. Police suggested that maybe she and Rob had a fight and she'd taken off for a few days to cool off. But her family knew that was completely out of character. Jennifer wasn't someone who ran away from her life. She was a woman who was passionately, joyfully building it. Fueled by a terrifying fear, the Kesse family realized they were on their own. They took matters into their own hands, printing thousands of flyers, organizing massive search parties, and relentlessly contacting anyone and everyone who might have seen something. For 2 agonizing days, there was nothing but silence. Then, on Thursday, January 26th, potential break. A resident of another condo complex, just over a mile from Jennifer's home, called the police. They had seen the news reports and recognized the missing car parked in their lot. Investigators descended on the vehicle, but the discovery just led to more confounding questions. There were no signs of a struggle inside the car. Valuables, like a portable DVD player, were still inside. Nothing of monetary value seemed to have been stolen. It looked as if the car was simply driven to this spot and abandoned. The single biggest clue came from a surveillance camera at that complex. The camera captured a person of interest parking Jennifer's car around noon on the day she disappeared. The footage is both haunting and maddeningly blurry. It captures a person who the FBI estimates is between 5 feet 3 inches and 5 feet 5 inches, pulling up in the Malibu. The driver sits in the car for a full 30 seconds before getting out. As they walk away, their image is almost completely obscured, slat by slat, by the bars of a security fence. Their face, their race, their gender, all are impossible to make out. The figure glances back once, a fleeting movement, and then walks out of the frame, disappearing into total, permanent anonymity. This ghostly figure is the only solid lead the investigation has ever had, and to this day, they have never been identified. The investigation has now stretched across nearly 2 decades, a vast desert of unanswered questions. Theories have swirled, but none have ever stuck. Was it one of the construction workers who had made her so uncomfortable? Despite extensive interviews, no suspects were ever named. Could it have been an ex-boyfriend or an acquaintance who knew her routine so well they could predict her every move? Investigators found no evidence pointing to anyone in her personal life. The most terrifying theory, and the one that haunts so many, is that it was a random, predatory crime of opportunity, a stranger who saw her leaving for work that morning and chose her. The abduction would have had to happen with terrifying speed and precision, somewhere in that small, familiar space between her front door and her car. Over the years, the Kesse family has fought with a tenacity born of love and desperation. They sued the Orlando Police Department to get access to the case files, eventually receiving over 16,000 documents that their own team of private investigators has been combing through ever since. In a significant development in late 2022, the case was officially transferred to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement's FDLE Cold Case Unit, bringing new hope and advanced resources to the search. As of May 2025, the FDLE has confirmed that Jennifer's case is no longer considered cold. It is an active and priority investigation. They have re-interviewed dozens of people and are re-evaluating all evidence with modern technology that didn't exist in 2006. They've also stated they have narrowed down a list of persons of interest and believe they are on a viable trail. For the Kesse family, this news is a ray of light after nearly 20 years of darkness. Her father, Drew Kesse, has said he believes this is Jennifer's best chance yet to be found. Jennifer Kesse walked out of her home to start a normal workday and simply vanished into thin air. Her disappearance is a chilling, visceral reminder of how a life, full of promise and light, can be erased in the most ordinary of moments, leaving behind only heartbreaking questions and a family that will never, ever stop fighting for answers. The Mother's Day mystery, the case of Suzanne Morphew. In the small, picturesque mountain town of Salida, Colorado, Suzanne Morphew was known as a dedicated and devoted mom to her 2 daughters. A resilient 2-time cancer survivor, she was a woman of deep and abiding faith. She and her husband, Barry, had moved their family from Indiana to Colorado for a fresh start, hoping to build a life surrounded by the breathtaking, tranquil beauty of the Rocky Mountains. But on Mother's Day 2020, that idyllic picture was violently and permanently torn apart. On Sunday, May 10, 2020, Suzanne Morphew was reported missing. Her husband, Barry, told investigators a straightforward story. He left their home very early that morning, well before Suzanne woke up, for a landscaping job several hours away in Broomfield. He said he sent her a text message wishing her a happy Mother's Day, but she never wrote back. Later that day, a neighbor, growing concerned after not hearing from Suzanne, made the call to police. The search began almost immediately, centering on the sprawling Morphew property. Soon, searchers made a discovery. Suzanne's mountain bike was found thrown in a ravine not far from their home. Her helmet was found a little ways away. There was no blood, no sign of a struggle, and most importantly, no sign of Suzanne. As search parties on foot and on ATVs combed the rugged, unforgiving terrain, Barry Morphew arrived back home. Right away, his behavior struck some observers as strange. He quickly posted a tearful, emotional video to Facebook, pleading for Suzanne's safe return, but to many, his grief looked performative, almost staged. Investigators quickly zeroed in on Barry as the primary person of interest. His alibi, the very foundation of his story, began to crumble under scrutiny. He claimed to be hours away on a job, but his own employee later said it was highly unusual for Barry to have gone on that work trip without him. More damningly, data recovered from his truck's GPS and his cell phone painted a very different picture. It showed him driving all over the local area on the very day Suzanne disappeared, including making a series of suspicious stops at multiple trash receptacles around the county. As police dug deeper into their lives, a much darker story of the Morphew marriage emerged. Friends and family revealed that their relationship was far from the perfect image they projected. Suzanne had been engaged in a secret, 2-year-long affair with a man she knew from high school. She had confided in friends that she was deeply unhappy and was making plans to finally leave Barry. Just days before she went missing, she sent Barry a text message, making her intentions clear. It said, "I'm done." The last known proof of her life was a serene selfie she sent to her lover on the afternoon of May 9th, the day before she was reported missing. The case against Barry was entirely circumstantial, but the pieces were damning. Investigators discovered a tranquilizer dart gun in the house. Barry, an avid and experienced hunter, admitted to using the gun and a chemical mixture known as BM, a potent drug cocktail used for sedating large wildlife, to illegally shoot and tranquilize deer. Then, a single, crucial piece of evidence was found in the family's clothes dryer, the protective cap to a tranquilizer dart needle. In May 2021, exactly 1 year after Suzanne vanished, Barry Morphew was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. The prosecution built a powerful narrative. They believed Barry had discovered Suzanne's affair and her definitive plan to leave him, and in a fit of rage, murdered her on the night of May 9th. They argued he used his expert knowledge of tranquilizers to incapacitate her before disposing of her body and staging the scene to look like a tragic bike accident. But the legal proceedings that followed were a complete disaster. The lead prosecutor was accused of serious misconduct, and crucial, potentially exculpatory evidence was withheld from the defense. A huge, insurmountable problem for the prosecution was that they had no body. Without Suzanne's remains, they couldn't definitively prove a murder had even happened. So, in a stunning move just days before the trial was set to begin in April 2022, the prosecution dropped all charges against Barry Morphew. The charges were dropped without prejudice, meaning they could be refiled if and when new evidence came to light. Barry walked out of jail a free man, insisting on his innocence. For over a year, the case went cold. It seemed like justice for Suzanne was completely out of reach. Then, in September 2023, everything changed. While conducting a search in an unrelated investigation, law enforcement found human remains in a remote, shallow grave near the small town of Moffett, about 45 miles south of Salida. Dental records soon confirmed the unthinkable. After more than 3 years of searching, they had finally found Suzanne Morphew. Her body was the breakthrough the case desperately needed. An autopsy officially ruled her death a homicide by undetermined means. But the most explosive finding came from the toxicology report. Forensic toxicologists found a chemical mixture of butorphanol, azapirone, and medetomidine, the exact drugs in that BM tranquilizer cocktail, in her very bones. This was the smoking gun. The new indictment states that the only private citizen in that entire region of Colorado with access to that specific chemical cocktail was Barry Morphew. The autopsy also revealed that Suzanne's body had begun to metabolize the drugs, a horrifying detail suggesting she didn't die right away. The state of her remains also hinted that she might have been buried somewhere else first, then exhumed and moved to the shallow grave where she was ultimately found. Armed with this powerful new forensic evidence, a grand jury was convened. In June of 2025, they handed down a new indictment, and Barry Morphew was arrested for a second time. He was taken into custody in Arizona, where he had been living, and is currently awaiting extradition to Colorado to finally stand trial for the murder of his wife. His lawyers maintain his innocence, claiming the government is simply trying to force the evidence to fit a narrative they already wrote. Suzanne Morphew's case is a tragic saga of a marriage rotted from the inside, a disappearance shrouded in deception, and a painstaking, years-long search for the truth. It is a powerful and disturbing illustration of one of the most common patterns in cases of missing women. The danger doesn't always come from a stranger in the dark, but from the person they share their life with. The Walk into Nothingness, the unsolved case of Lauren Spierer. The life of a 20-year-old college student is often a vibrant whirlwind of classes, newfound freedoms, friends, and late nights. For Lauren Spierer, a sophomore at Indiana University, the night of June 2, 2011, started out like so many others, a casual night out with friends in the bustling college town of Bloomington. But this routine night of fun would end with her walking barefoot and alone down a city street in the pre-dawn hours, and then vanishing forever. Lauren was a vibrant, ambitious, and fashionable young woman from Scarsdale, New York. She was studying textiles, a field that matched her creative spirit, and was surrounded by a close circle of friends. She was also incredibly petite, standing at just 4 feet 11 inches tall and weighing under 100 pounds, a detail that would later amplify the deep sense of her vulnerability. On that Thursday night, Lauren and her friends started drinking at her apartment building before heading to a popular local sports bar, Kilroy's. Security footage from the bar shows her laughing and having a good time, but it also documents that she was becoming more and more visibly intoxicated as the night wore on. The timeline of Lauren's last known hours is a confusing and chaotic mess, pieced together from conflicting witness statements and grainy, disjointed security videos. She left Kilroy's with a friend, Corey Rossman, who was also clearly and heavily intoxicated. They walked to his apartment building, where he apparently got into a physical altercation with another student. Lauren, trying to intervene, was allegedly punched in the process. After the fight, she and Rossman went up to her apartment building. At the bar, she had lost her shoes and her cell phone, leaving her disconnected and exposed. Inside her building, concerned friends saw her condition and tried to persuade her to go to her room and sleep it off, but she refused, insisting she had to go back to Rossman's apartment to find her phone. This was a critical, fateful moment. Despite being extremely drunk, disoriented, and vulnerable, she was allowed to leave. She and Rossman stumbled back to his apartment, where his roommate, Mike Beth, was present. Rossman was so intoxicated he passed out on the floor, and Beth had to help him to bed. Beth later told police he tried to convince Lauren to sleep on their couch for her own safety, but she was adamant, insisting on going to another friend's apartment nearby. Around 4:30 a.m. on June 3rd, Lauren was last seen leaving Rossman's apartment building. A neighbor witnessed her stumbling, alone and barefoot, at the corner of 11th Street and College Avenue. It was a short, familiar walk to her own apartment, a path she had taken countless times before. But on that morning, she never made it home. When Lauren's boyfriend, Jesse Wolfe, couldn't reach her later that morning, a gnawing worry turned to panic. He reported her missing. The search that ensued was almost immediate, and it was massive, involving local police, the FBI, and hundreds of civilian volunteers who scoured every corner of Bloomington. But from the very beginning, the investigation was severely hampered by a total lack of physical evidence and the conflicting, often changing stories from the very people who saw her last. The focus of the investigation naturally fell on the young men she was with in those final, crucial hours: Corey Rossman, his roommate Mike Beth, and their neighbor, Jay Rosenbaum. All three men, as well as her boyfriend Jesse Wolfe, hired lawyers very soon after she disappeared and were reportedly uncooperative with police, a fact that Lauren's parents found incredibly frustrating and suspicious. Her father, Robert Spierer, publicly pleaded with their parents to help them find their moral compass and compel their sons to tell the whole truth. The men have always maintained that they have no idea what happened to Lauren after she walked away from the apartment, but suspicion has followed them for over a decade. One of the most prominent theories is that Lauren might have suffered a medical emergency, possibly an overdose, while she was with them. Lauren had a known heart condition called long QT syndrome, which can trigger a cardiac event, especially when combined with alcohol or certain drugs. This theory suggests that the men panicked, terrified they would be blamed for her death, and made the horrific decision to cover it up and dispose of her body. Another prevailing theory is that she was a tragic victim of a crime of opportunity. Walking alone in the early morning, in her intoxicated state, she would have been an easy and obvious target for a predator. This idea gained some traction in 2015 when another IU student, Anna Wilson, was murdered after leaving the very same bar. The man convicted of her murder was investigated for a possible connection to Lauren's case, but ultimately, no charges were ever filed. The complete lack of a body or any real forensic evidence has left the investigation at a frustrating dead end. Over the years, police have received and investigated more than 36,000 tips and served numerous search warrants, but nothing has ever led to a breakthrough. The case is still officially open and active, but as the years stretch into more than a decade, hope for concrete answers fades. For Lauren's parents, Charlene and Robert Spierer, the pain is a constant, unending presence. On the 14th anniversary of her disappearance in June 2025, her mother Charlene wrote, "The not knowing what happened, the not knowing where Lauren's remains are, the lack of any kind of closure is devastating, exhausting, endless." Lauren Spierer's case is a heartbreaking and cautionary example of how a series of poor decisions and a collective failure of responsibility can lead to a terrible tragedy. While the official police response was swift and massive, the failure of her friends to properly look out for her, to recognize the depth of her vulnerability and make sure she was safe, created the window of opportunity for her to disappear. Her story is a haunting reminder that danger doesn't just lurk in dark alleys. Sometimes, it follows us home from a regular night out, when the people we trust fail to protect us. She walked out of an apartment building and into the early morning light, and simply ceased to exist. The stories of Jennifer Kesse, Suzanne Morphew, and Lauren Spierer are separated by years and hundreds of miles, but they are inextricably tied together by a common, terrifying thread. Each woman disappeared from the supposed safety of her daily life. Jennifer was on her way to her job. Suzanne was out for a Mother's Day bike ride in her own neighborhood. Lauren was walking a familiar path home from a friend's apartment. These aren't extraordinary situations or high-risk behaviors. They are the simple, everyday acts that should be safe for every one of us. Their cases throw a harsh, unforgiving light on the hidden patterns that so often define these tragedies. We see the fragile illusion of safety get shattered: a gated community, a quiet mountain town, a familiar college campus walk, all turned into the epicenter of a nightmare. We see the awful, all too common consequences when a husband or boyfriend becomes the main suspect, turning a relationship that should have been built on trust into one that ends in the ultimate betrayal and violence. And we see how the actions or inactions of the people around them in those final moments can irrevocably change the course of a life, creating the small window of opportunity for a predator to strike or a tragedy to unfold. These cases also force us to confront some deeply uncomfortable truths about our society. While all three of these women received a significant amount of media attention, it's a sad and undeniable fact that countless other cases, especially those involving women of color, never get that same spotlight. This missing white woman syndrome creates an implicit hierarchy of victims, where some lives are treated as more newsworthy, more valuable, and more deserving of our collective anger and resources than others. It is a systemic failure of media and law enforcement that must be addressed if we ever hope to find justice for everyone who goes missing. The fight for answers goes on, carried by the tireless love of their families. For Jennifer Kesse and Lauren Spierer, their cases remain unsolved, their families trapped in the special, ambiguous kind of grief that comes with not knowing. For Suzanne Morphew, the discovery of her remains brought a painful end to the search, but the battle for justice in a courtroom is only just beginning. These women are more than just cases. They were daughters, sisters, and friends whose vibrant lives were stolen. Their stories must serve as a call to action, to be more aware of our surroundings, to protect each other, and to demand that every single person who vanishes without a trace receives the same urgent attention and unwavering effort. The investigation into the disappearance of Jennifer Kesse is active and ongoing. If you have any information, no matter how small or insignificant you think it is, please contact the Florida Department of Law Enforcement's Orlando office at 407-245-0888. For any information regarding the disappearance of Lauren Spierer, please contact the Bloomington Police Department. Her family also runs a website with information on how to submit an anonymous tip. These families have waited long enough for answers. It just takes one person, one piece of information, to finally bring them the peace they deserve. Please, if you know something, say something.